This episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast is brought to you entirely by fan support. To help keep the series ad-free, get early access and bonus features, browse gear and apparel, join the community, or watch the series come to life in living color, you can check out the links in the description. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Sharp, and welcome. Sorry, I wanted to see how quickly I could do my my intro and still make it flow. It's getting late in the day, guys. Your boy is a little bit on the loosey-goosey side, so be warned. It's going to be a fun one. I sometimes record these in batches, which is, if you know, like, over the course of several weeks, you'll see, different sort of energy come up, and a lot of times it's because I do them back to back to back to back. And different topics will leave me in a different mood. Different situations will happen. Sometimes we'll have a beer in between. Anyway, the title of this podcast is A Moment of Appreciation, and I title it that because sometimes I sort of notice myself missing the trees for the forest. And when that happens, I always like to check back, sort of pick a tree and really look at it. Let me explain a little further on this weird tree conversation. One of the great benefits of the human operating system is the way that we can reduce, simplify, and sometimes outright ignore extraneous information. Think about something like the white noise of an air conditioner. I find that sound comforting, and many people use it to go to sleep. But imagine if we were utterly focused on it, 100% focused on it all the time. Or if we were acutely aware of every single smell that we breathed in, every single breath, if every, when you're I've focused on this amazing smell. And now imagine if that was all the time. It would be so intense. Our brain needs to be able to sort of, back off and kind of let those things fade away. If you looked out in a park full of trees and your brain was filled with all the knowledge of the size and shape and number of every branch, you would go insane. It would completely paralyze you mentally. So what our brains are really good at is picking out what's important and sort of tossing the rest of the information into the kind of back system. And while that can be really helpful a lot of the time, it can also lead to reductionism every once in a while. And I call reductionism when our brain gets a little too hasty trying to kind of smooth things over and get really efficient that ultimately you stop seeing things in the world around you. That's what people talk about, I think, with kind of trying to chase presence, being present in this moment. Sometimes your brain kind of gets going really fast and, time is flying by and you're not even thinking about what you're doing. And that's why people talk about trying to recapture presence. And I've had moments on the other end, where the world around you starts to feel like it's partially incorporeal, everything is just kind of this weird blur. Nothing really matters and you're just going through the motions. And I think that's kind of when your brain has gone a little too far and started glossing over everything rather than just the unimportant details. You're not seeing any of the trees anymore, you're just kind of seeing one big blobby hole that you call the forest. And then it's easy to reduce that forest to just be it's the forest. It's just one word. It's not even a thing that exists, and then you ignore it completely. Getting a little bit abstract here, but essentially the idea is you stop paying attention to the details. I think, to get political again, on a societal scale, this is how people in positions of power can be almost unfathomably cruel sometimes. If you're overseeing thousands, millions, or even billions of people, you need to reduce the problems facing you to be small enough for a human to comprehend. But when you do that and you just group things by just data and patterns and trends, you kind of run the risk of losing sight of the humans that make up those statistics. What's that quote? One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. It's true. As observers, we can't comprehend these large-scale things and how many people they truly affect. And so we reduce it, and then all of a sudden our empathy sort of short circuits. I can guarantee that I have a more visceral reaction to the death of a favorite character on TV than I do to reading about terrible, horrible things happening to thousands of people. And that's not because I don't care. It's just because our brain is hardwired to respond to like one thing, and we can't process that volume unless we really, really dig deep into it. That's why I think stories about tragedies are so important, because they give you that perspective. They tell those stories that can be so hard to derive, in our daily life. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing, that to not spend every moment remembering the incredible, excruciating details of any tragedy. It's a gift that we have to be able to let some of those things go. But it's also an important, that's why I think it's so important to also be able to take a moment back and step into those moments and live them. It's all just, it's kind of finding that balance of, presence and obviously efficiency in living your life. And after that little unpleasant sidebar, like I just wanted to, I kind of talked about that concept, and I wanted to, share the moment of appreciation that I take when I think I'm getting a little bit too far, where I'm not present anymore. And I'll finish with that because it's happened to me numerous times where I've kind of caught myself being, like I'm really not present, I'm not hearing it. And this is what I'll sometimes do to kind of bring myself back out of it. So I try to look at any aspect of my life, sort of think of it as picking one tree. Sometimes I will literally go outside to a tree outside of my house. This is what I did one of the first times I did it, and you get observant and you get curious and you appreciate. You sort of look at all the leaves and all the branches. You think about the years of growth it took for that tree to grow from a sapling into a mighty tree. I'll look at like all the indentations on the bark, at any of the cuts and imperfections that are there. I'll sort of trace the roots and try to visualize all the animals that have fed on that tree, that are feeding on that tree, or that may one day feed on it or fly away from it or use its branches. And, and once I've done that for just one tree, I have a much bigger appreciation for the forest and for all its countless trees. Because when you look at it again, you kind of go, whoa, I forgot that there is so much to comprehend about everything in life. And it makes you have a bigger appreciation for all of those little moments and how much you can really appreciate within them. So, if you ever find yourself a bit reductionist, if the world has started to go a little gray and blurry, maybe that little exercise will help. And maybe you can do the same. Because I know in times like these around the world, and in busy times for all of us, it's really nice sometimes to just remember the grand scale of beauty and, detail and fascination, even within like a small little branches of a tree. So, anyway, this has been the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Seventh Valkyrie Podcast, which is brought to you entirely by fan support. To help keep the series ad-free, get early access and bonus features, browse gear and apparel, join the community, or watch the series come to life in living color, you can check out the links in the description.